Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com. Today we're going to make cinnamon rolls, or you may know them as cinnamon buns, and this is what it looks like. This is a enriched white yeast bread that has a wonderfully soft and tender crumb. We're going to fill it with a mixture of brown sugar, some ground cinnamon, and lots of butter, and excellent plain, but today we're going to drizzle on the top a powdered sugar glaze. So the first thing that we're going to do is warm some ingredients. So you will need a saucepan, and the first thing is 1 cup, that's 240 milliliters or 240 grams of milk. And you could use whole milk, or you could use a reduced, like 2%. I wouldn't use the fat-free here. You want a little bit of fat. And we're going to add 1/3 cup, 75 grams of butter. I'm using unsalted butter. And I've cut it into small pieces, just so it melts faster. And also 1/3 cup, 65 grams of granulated white sugar, and just 1/2 teaspoon, 2 grams of salt. Now what we're going to do is just heat this up on, medium-low heat. We just want it to lukewarm. Lukewarm meaning 120 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 49 degrees Celsius. If you want to be really accurate, you could use a thermometer for this. Or, you know what I do? I don't normally use my thermometer. I just put a little right on the inside of my wrist. Kind of like, when you're with a baby, you test the milk to see if it's not too hot. You put it on the inside of your wrist. Same sort of thing. So it's just very lukewarm. So either way. Okay, looks about right. There's still a little butter, not quite melted, but it will if I let it sit for a second. I'm just going to try it. Yep, just lukewarm. So now I'm just going to pour, you don't have to at home, but I'm just going to pour this in here. Okay. So now I'm just going to have to go away for a second to get my mixer, and then when we come back, we will start our dough. So now for our bread dough. If you have a stand mixer like I have here, we're going to start with the paddle attachment, but you'll also need a dough hook. If you have a hand mixer that has those 2 attachments, you could do it that way, or really, you can do it by hand. It's a little bit of kneading, but you can do it that way. The first thing that you will need is 2 1/4 cups, which is 295 grams of all-purpose flour, or plain flour. Put that in there. We're going to need more flour a little later. And then for our yeast. Now, you could use active dry yeast. Sometimes it comes in a box with those little packets inside, or sometimes you can buy it like in a jar. If you're buying in the box, you will need 1 1/4 ounce package, which is 7 grams. Or if you buy it loose, like in a little jar, you will need 2 teaspoons of active dry yeast. Or you could use instant yeast, 2 teaspoons, 6 grams of SAF. I like to use the gold instant yeast, but you could use the red if that's all. So you do have options there. And then I'm going to add 3 tablespoons, 21 grams of dried milk powder. I like to add that to bread dough sometimes because it does help with the color, with the flavor, because it's a milk powder. And also it helps keep the bread nice and moist. Now, you don't have to. A lot of times, if I don't have it in the house, I just leave it out. So you can just leave it out. Now, I'm just going to mix this together, low speed. So, with the yeast, today I use both types, the active dry sometimes, and sometimes I use the instant, but I will tell you today I'm using the SAF Gold Instant Yeast. But really, I've done it both. I don't find any difference, so it's up to you. So now what I'm going to do is have the mixer on low speed, and I'm going to gradually add my milk, just to have it on like first speed. Okay. And if you found that you did heat your milk up a little too hot, like when you put on your wrist, just let your milk sit on the counter until it's lukewarm, because you don't want to kill your yeast if it's way too hot. You don't want that. We won't get a good rise from our dough. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 3 large eggs. I have my eggs at room temperature. That's 150 grams. I'm going to, again, just on low speed, I'm going to add 1 and then second and then a third. Okay, and as always, you know, periodically stop, scrape the sides and the bottom, make sure everything gets mixed together. So now what we're going to do is beat our dough here for 3 minutes. I do have my timer. Set your timer for 3 minutes. I'm going to beat it on medium-high speed. That's going to develop, strengthen our dough, so 3 minutes. Put my timer on. That was 3 minutes. So now we are going to switch over to our dough hook. And I'm going to add another 2 1/4 cups, 295 grams of the all-purpose plain flour. Now normally that's about the right amount, but I usually have another about 1/4 cup, 30 grams of flour, just in case I need it, because you know your flour, the absorption rate can, you know, depending on how the flour was stored, so maybe you'll need a little more. So now what we're going to do is we're going to knead the dough. We want a really nice soft and silky and not sticky dough. So I'm going to say between 3 and 5 minutes on second speed. And then we'll check it at that point. Actually, I'm going to go, I find it does take 5 minutes, so that's what I'm going to do today. But you might want to, with your mixer, might be a little different. Check it at 3. Okay, so it's been about 5 minutes. When I feel it, yeah, feels good. Now, like I said, if you found it like really sticky, you might have to add just a little more flour. So I'm just gonna scrape that off. If you have one of these plastic scrapers, it's really good for cleaning the sides of your bowl. I'm going to put a little flour down here. Okay. And if you like sometimes I like to knead by hand, so I finish it off by doing that, but it's really nice and smooth and silky, elastic. If you want to do what is called the window pane test, need a little water on your hands. Take a little bit of dough, and don't pull it, like kind of twist it like that. And we want to be able to pull it. If you find, just gently go around and pull, stretch it, I should say. And we don't want it to, if you find your dough is breaking, ripping, then you need to beat it a little more. That's a sign it needs more kneading. But this looks good. Holding together. So we did knead it enough. So that's what you're looking for. Like I said, if at this point it was starting to rip, then you might want to just knead it by hand or put it back in your machine. Yeah, that's good. So we are done. So now, a large bowl. You could spray the inside of your bowl with one of those nonstick sprays. I'm going to put a little bit of just a flavorless oil, vegetable or corn or canola, whatever you have, or even a light olive oil. And then I just take a paper towel. I mean, there is butter in our dough, so it doesn't tend to stick, but we want to make sure it doesn't stick to our bowl. And then what I do is put it in there like that and then flip it, so then there's a little oil on the top, and we're going to cover it with plastic wrap. Now we're going to proof this. Whenever you do like an enriched bread dough, which means it has the butter and the eggs, the dough tends to take longer to proof. I'm going to say about an hour and a half. It could take less or could take a little more depending on your temperature of your kitchen, but you want to let it proof at room temperature. By room temperature, I mean 73 to about 75 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 23, 24 C. Because like I said, if it's like your kitchen is like colder than that, it'll take longer to proof. Conversely, if it's warmer than that, it'll take less. But what we're looking for, it will not quite double in size, but become nice and puffy and soft. If your kitchen is really cold, one idea is you can put it in your oven, turned off oven. Put your oven light on and then put your bread dough in there. Now you may have to monitor maybe after about a half hour, because sometimes depending, I find that that oven light will really warm up the inside of the oven. So sometimes after about a half hour, I do turn the light off because it can get pretty hot in there. So what we're going to do is going to let this proof, and then when we come back, we will continue on. So we're back. For reference, it's been about an hour and a half, and my room temperature is 75 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 24 C. So this is what your dough should look like. Nice and soft. And then don't like punch it down. I know used to be, they'd say just punch it down. Just gently release the air. Okay. And now I'm going to let that rest straight on the counter while we make our filling. So in just a bowl, I have 3/4 cup, which is 155 grams of light brown sugar. If you are using a cup measurement, kind of press down the brown sugar into the cup to get rid of any air pockets. And then I'm going to add, you have to have brown sugar and cinnamon. So 1 tablespoon, 6 grams of ground cinnamon. Of course, if you don't want as much or you want more, you can vary that. And then I am adding 1/4 cup, 30 grams of all-purpose flour, plain flour. And just kind of mix that together. If you wanted to, I mean, I'm making the filling right now, but if you can do it ahead of time, and then just cover it and put it into the refrigerator. Like if you wanted to make it even the day before, you could do that. And that looks good. And then we are going to add 1/2 cup, 113 grams of cold. I'm using unsalted butter. You could use salted butter. I did just cut it into little pieces, because then we got to cut the butter into the sugar mixture. And it's easier if it's in little pieces, not one big chunk. Okay. Now you could work the butter into the brown sugar with your fingers, or you could use a fork, or I'm using a pastry blender. It's my favorite tool. And just cut it in until you have coarse crumbs. Just press down if you're using one of these, and you'll have to scrape it off every once in a while. Okay, that looks good. And then I'm just going to give it a quick stir. Make sure everything's moistened. Okay, so now we have the filling, we have our bread dough, our pan. You will need a 9 by 13 inch, which is 23 by 33. This one has 2-inch sides, 5 centimeter. So I'm just going to butter my pan. Just melted, about a tablespoon of butter, about 15 grams, and then just pastry brush. But just brush the bottom and sides. But you could use one of those non-stick sprays, or you could just lightly oil it. I'm using a metal pan today, but sometimes I use glass. You may notice, just depending on whether you're using a metal or a glass, may take a little, like a minute or two difference in cooking time, but that's, I need that brush. That's about it. So now we got our pan, we are ready. I'm gonna lightly flour my surface. We are going to roll our bread dough into a 12-inch square, 30 centimeters. So just put your dough on your surface and just, oh, such a beautiful, I love bread dough. So now with a rolling pin, I'm just going to roll it out. Periodically lift and turn it to make sure it's not sticking, and plus you want it to let it shrink back if it wants to. And I do have my trusty ruler here. Okay, I think that's about right. I roll it just a little larger than 12 inches, 30 centimeters, because just so that, if you kind of have some spring back. I guess that's the word. Yeah. Okay. So now, once you have your dough rolled out, what I like to do is, I've got a little light cream, or half and half, and just with a pastry brush, I'm going to brush the surface. That way when I put the cinnamon sugar on there, it'll help it stick. You could just use water. Or really, if you want to be naughty or decadent, you could even put a thin layer of pastry cream. Or some maybe apricot preserves that have been heated and strained, thinned out a bit. If you want to add a little more flavor. But we'll just use some cream here. And then take, now leave about an inch here. That's 2.5 centimeters, because when we roll it up, that way we can seal it. Just kind of scatter your, so good. You could also add, I just like my brown sugar and cinnamon. You could add some chopped nuts or raisins, walnuts or pecans or dark raisins, currants, about, say, 50 grams, somewhere around there. But, I just like mine plain, so. Or I even think you could add some dried fruit here. I've been making this, I got this recipe, back in the 90s. I clipped it out of a magazine, and I used to make it when the kids were younger. I used to make it every Christmas. Kind of a tradition. It's one of those recipes that I've had for a long time. So now, just kind of even that out. and press, just gently press in. Try to get it pretty even so then everybody will get lots of that sugar mixture. So now we're going to roll it up. I like to start at this end, or the, whatever end you've left. I like it here, the one where we're going to seal it, so I'll start at this end. You don't want to roll too tight. If you roll like really tight, then what you may find is the centers pop up. So it's not like when you're rolling a sponge and you kind of push back a lot to really get a tight roll. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure I brush that again with some cream. And then I'll keep that on the bottom and kind of press down to seal it. Now I'm about 12 inches, 30 centimeters. So I like large cinnamon rolls, buns. I think in Canada, I used to always say cinnamon buns, but when I moved to the States, people would look at me and go, when I'd ask for a cinnamon bun, they'd kind of look at me strange. So cinnamon roll in the States. I think that's the difference. At least I found that. So I'm going to cut this in half. I need a knife. At about 6 inches. You can, I'll be honest, I usually just eyeball this when I'm not on camera. Just cut down. And if we want to be precise, we can then go 3. Okay, I'm going to eyeball the last one. But if you wanted to make them smaller, you could. You may make 12. Now this kind of cinnamon roll is not like those ones you get in the mall, the Cinnabon, that are very kind of gooey. This is more like bread, which is what I like. So then we're going to just space these 4 rows of 2. Okay, there we go. So now, there's a couple choices here. What we're going to do first is, I got a piece of plastic wrap. I'm going to just spray it with a non-stick spray. You could just lightly oil it. And then I'm going to put that over the top, just loosely. So that way when they rise, if they do rise up and hit that plastic wrap, they won't stick. So now there's 2 choices. I'm going to proof these today, and at room temperature, remember 73 to 75 Fahrenheit, 23, 24 C, they will take about an hour to, what's going to happen, they'll kind of grow together and almost double in size. But, oftentimes, like I said, I typically made these a lot for Christmas morning. So what I would do is do these the night before. Do it to this, like this, and then just put your whole pan into the fridge overnight. And what will happen, you'll have a slow rise. And then in the morning, all you got to do is take them out of the fridge, put them on the counter, let them come to room temperature, and then you can bake them off. So it's great do ahead. But today we're going to actually let them rise right now. So I'm going to say an hour until they're almost double. They'll kind of all grow together. And then just before, when you see that they're about ready to bake off, you want to preheat your oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 190 degrees Celsius. So we'll see you back in an hour. So it's been about an hour, and we are ready to bake our cinnamon rolls. So again, have your oven preheated to 375 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 190 degrees Celsius. And then, you can see, aren't they gorgeous? If you kind of press, your finger will leave a little indentation and then it will slowly come back up. So what I like to do before I bake them off is I just have a little, I think I have light cream, half and half, or heavy cream. Actually, you could use a little milk. And I'm just going to lightly brush them. That's the tops. I like to brush them with the cream because it does help with browning. There we go. So we are ready to bake them off. Everyone's oven is a little different. I do find if you're using a metal or a glass, there could be a little difference in the temperature, but I'm going to say 20-25 minutes. I do like to rotate the pan front to back about halfway through baking. It gives you a nice even bake because typically your oven does have hot spots. So they will rise a bit, called oven spring. When you put in something, a yeast bread, you get a bit of rise. They will turn a beautiful golden brown. If you take a toothpick and insert it like in here, it will come out clean. You give a little tap, kind of sounds hollow. And a really good way is if you have a thermometer, you can just stick it into like this part, say right here, and you should get a reading of 188 Fahrenheit, which is 87 degrees Celsius. So there's, lots of little ways. After a while, if you do it often, you will just know just by looking at them. So I'm going to say 20 to 25 minutes. So our cinnamon rolls are done. So put your pan on a wire rack. Don't they look gorgeous? And the kitchen smells of yeast and cinnamon. It's just so good. So now, I did check. I took them out and then checked the temperature. It was at about 188 Fahrenheit, 87 Celsius. And you're better to err slightly on you don't want to over bake these because then they're dry. So it's better to be on a little under baked, then they'll just be a little more soft. And I like to, as soon as they come out, is again brush the tops with some more of your cream. So gorgeous. And I am going to flip them out of the pan, and that way, so usually when it's soft, that brown sugars will sink down. It might onto the bottom of the pan, which I don't want, so we're going to take them out right away. So I'm just going to run just to make sure nothing's sticking here. Okay, and gloves. Sure. And we're just going to flip it over. And that way you can see there is some in the pan, but not too much. So at this point, I'm just going to leave them like that to cool off. I actually don't typically at home put the powdered glaze on, but today we will. Some people really like that extra little bit of sugar. So I'm going to let these cool down for probably, close to room temperature. So let's say 20 minutes. And then when we come back, we'll invert it the other way and we will put on our powdered sugar glaze. So I did let my cinnamon rolls cool down to almost room temperature. So I would say probably it was 30 minutes. So now what I'm going to do is just flip them back up like so. Oh, just love cinnamon roll. So now, like I said, you don't need to do the powdered sugar glaze. I often don't, but there is a lot of people that like it. So what I have here is 3/4 of a cup, 90 grams of confectioner's sugar. You may know that as powdered or icing sugar. And to that, I'm just going to add, I'm going to start with probably 1 to 2 tablespoons of, you can either use a half and half, a light cream, heavy cream, milk. So I'll just start with 1, let's see. Now, some people, I actually like my cinnamon buns to cool down before I put the glaze over, and then the glaze kind of sits on top. Some people actually like to, I'm going to put a little more in there, maybe half a tablespoon. Some people like to put the glaze on the cinnamon rolls while they're still hot, and that way the glaze will actually kind of soak into the buns and kind of make them more soft and gooey. So I'll leave that up to you, which way you want to do it. If you like it to do it while they're still hot, you might want to make a little more glaze than this because you'll need lots. I'm just going to drizzle it over the top, so you don't want it too thick. Yeah, kind of runs off the spoon. That's the way I like it. So now I'm just going to drizzle it over the top. I must admit, when you put the glaze on, it does kind of dress them up. Makes them look even more appetizing than they already are, right? I think that's about the right amount of glaze. That's the way I like them. So there we have it. They just look so pretty. So now, you can take a knife and just separate them. And then you have, see, really nice, soft. The bread is kind of like a brioche. Not quite as rich. We didn't put that much butter like a brioche. It's way more butter. But it has the butter and the eggs. So it's quite rich, and it's got, as you can see, it's so soft. I just like to, I don't know about you, but I always like to unravel. And if I'm feeling, okay, I'm not thinking about calories, then sometimes I put a little more butter on there. I won't today. Oh. Like I said, it's an enriched bread. It's, a little more rich than, say, a white sandwich bread, but it's not as rich as, say, the brioche. To me, it's just perfect. And the cinnamon brown sugar mixture with some butter, it's just really nice. Now, of course, they are at their very best the day freshly made, right? But I find you can keep them 2 or 3 days. And what I like to do, that's why a lot of times I don't put the icing, is I'll cut them in half, and then I'll put them on a baking sheet and broil the top, toast the tops under the broiler, and then I put some butter. They're just so good. You got to try that. And then that kind of freshens them up. So even the third day, if they're even a little stale, if you toast them, perfect. I don't know which way I like better, this or toasted. So you must try these. And until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com.